In the 1970s, the wealthiest tourists shopping in Miami, Florida, didn't come from London, Tokyo, or Dubai. They came from South America. They were famously nicknamed the "Give Me Two" crowd. When they bought luxury condos, Cadillacs, or Rolexes, they didn't ask for the price. They just asked for two. This was the era of Saudi Venezuela, a nation sitting on the largest proven oil reserves on the entire planet, a country with the highest economic growth rate in Latin America, where the average citizen was twice as rich as someone in Chile, 4 times richer than someone in Japan, and 12 times richer than someone in China. But today, that same country looks like the aftermath of a war. Venezuela has suffered the single largest economic collapse of any nation in modern history not engaged in armed conflict. The economy shrank by 80%. Hyperinflation reached an incomprehensible 130,000%. Some estimates from the IMF put it as high as 1.3 million%, and nearly 8 million people, a quarter of the population, fled for their lives, rivaling Syria as one of the largest displacement crises in modern history. How did a nation with more oil than Saudi Arabia go from the millionaire of the Americas to a collapsed society in just 2 decades? Politicians will tell you it was American sanctions. Others will tell you it was crashing oil prices. But the truth is far darker. This wasn't an accident. It was a perfectly executed economic suicide. And to understand how a country destroys itself, you first have to understand a toxic economic trap. Imagine your small town suddenly discovers a massive gold mine. Suddenly, everyone quits their jobs to mine gold. The baker stops baking. The farmer stops farming. The local currency skyrockets in value, making it incredibly cheap to just import bread and vegetables from the next town over. But what happens when the price of gold crashes? The town has no money, no gold, and because everyone quit their jobs, nobody remembers how to bake bread or farm the land. They are left with nothing. For nearly a century, Venezuela was that town. The economy was a one-legged stool. They relied entirely on oil for 95% of their export revenue. But in 1999, a charismatic former military officer named Hugo Chávez was elected president, promising to take the oil wealth from the corrupt elites and give it back to the people. Chávez launched the Bolivarian Revolution. To fund massive new social programs, he needed total control of the state-run oil company, PDVSA. But the company's engineers and executives pushed back against his political interference. So, in 2002, Chávez did something unprecedented. On live television, blowing a referee's whistle, he fired them. Not just a few executives. Chávez purged 18,000 highly trained geologists, engineers, and technicians, and replaced them with political loyalists who knew absolutely nothing about drilling for oil. You might be wondering, if you fire all your experts, doesn't your oil company collapse? It does, but Chávez got incredibly lucky. Throughout the 2000s, global oil prices skyrocketed to record highs, masking the rot inside the company. Production was quietly falling, but the country was swimming in cash. But what happens when a government addicted to spending starts running out of money? They rig the game. In 2003, Chávez implemented strict currency controls through an agency called PDVSA. He pegged the Venezuelan bolivar to the US dollar at a fixed artificial rate. This created the most lucrative black market on earth. If you were a political insider, you could buy a US dollar from the government for just a few pennies. You could then walk out to the black market and sell that exact same dollar for a massive profit. It was free money. Billions of dollars were siphoned out of the country by corrupt elites. In 2007, this exploded into a massive international scandal when a man was caught flying into Argentina with a briefcase stuffed with $800,000 in undeclared cash, siphoned directly from these currency schemes. To stop the runaway inflation caused by this currency nightmare, the government implemented brutal price controls. Again, let's look at the math. Imagine you own a grocery store, and milk costs you $2 to buy from the farmer. The government suddenly passes a law stating that To protect the poor, milk can only be sold for $1. If you sell it for $1, you go bankrupt. So, what do? You stop selling milk. Now apply that to eggs, toilet paper, medicine, and flour. Almost overnight, supermarket shelves across the country went completely bare. To enforce his rules, Chávez went on national television, walked down the streets of Caracas, pointed at private businesses, banks, and supermarkets, and shouted a single word: expropriate it. By nationalizing everything from the massive Sidor steel plants to Cargill rice factories, the government destroyed whatever was left of Venezuela's domestic production. And then, the one-legged stool finally toppled. In 2013, Hugo Chávez died, leaving his successor, Nicolas Maduro, in charge of a ticking time bomb. The next year, global oil prices crashed. The money stopped. The mirage was over. The rotting infrastructure finally gave way. In 2012, the Amway oil refinery, one of the largest in the world, exploded because untrained political appointees hadn't bothered to tighten the screws on a gas pump. 47 people died. With no oil revenue and no domestic industry, the Maduro government just printed money. This triggered the worst hyperinflation of the 21st century. A cup of coffee that cost 2,300 bolivars in January could cost 2 million by December. The monthly minimum wage became mathematically meaningless. The currency became so worthless that people stopped counting money and started weighing it. Street vendors like Wilmer Rojas began sweeping discarded banknotes out of the gutters to weave them into origami purses and crowns, because the physical paper the money was printed on was worth more than the money itself. The average Venezuelan lost 24 pounds in a single year, not from a diet, from starvation. The ultimate symbol of this collapse stands in the center of Caracas. The Torre de David was supposed to be a glittering 45-story monument to capitalism, the third highest skyscraper in the country. Instead, construction halted, and it was taken over by thousands of squatters, transforming into the world's tallest vertical slum. People lived 40 stories in the air without walls, climbing thousands of stairs daily because the elevators were never installed. But wait, didn't the United States destroy the economy with brutal sanctions? That is the most common defense of the regime. But the timeline tells a different story. While the US did sanction individuals early on, the devastating embargo on Venezuela's state oil company didn't happen until 2019. By that time, production had already halved. Inflation was already in triple digits. The GDP had already plummeted by 20%. The sanctions were a devastating blow, absolutely. Today the fallout is biblical. Over 50% of the population lives in extreme poverty. More than 7.9 million Venezuelans have fled the country. Doctors, engineers, teachers, undertaking perilous journeys through the Darien Gap and across the continent just to survive. The IMF projects that number will reach 8.4 million, nearly 30% of the pre-crisis population. Venezuela didn't collapse because it lacked resources. It collapsed because of a toxic cocktail of unchecked authoritarian power, the systematic destruction of human capital, and policies that defied basic mathematics. They traded experts for loyalists, production for price controls, and reality for a mirage. It took decades to build the wealthiest nation in South America. It took just 20 years to dismantle it entirely.